June, navigating change, emerging trends and real estate regulations and the impact on the industry. You must watch because many decisions you take on your buying a property, and if you don't do the due diligence, you get into trouble. So here is the experts who are going to share with you what exactly happening in terms of when you do buy a property, in terms of property development, all that. We got outstanding panel, 4 of them from RERA, from attorneys, from Shardul Amachan. They're already lined up. The invitation already been sent to you. Then on 20th, we have again Read and Grow. Coffee can be Read and Grow. The subject is coffee can be invested. So Babu Krishnamurthy leading the conversation. We have Ajit Gautam and Satya. Now on 24th, again, we have a very, very good event is Media and You. Trends and challenges, opportunities today. I think Lata Rajgopal, she has done this book with 10 outstanding women leaders are coming and sharing their thoughts on media management and how their experience, what they think. And they are going to give a lot of lessons how one you want to become a media manager, especially for women. And it's a very fantastic job. And please not to miss, it's happening in person on 24th of June here. 26th, this is a webinar series of lectures we have started on mental well-being. There's a lot of demand, a lot of things are getting disturbed. People are really getting disturbed for obvious reasons, maybe in the office, other places. We thought we'd run a series of mental well-being and what we themed it as unleashing the inner potential, cultivating mental resilience for well-being. The inaugural session is starting on the 26th, which we are doing jointly with Buddhi Clinic. You know, Buddhi Clinic is one of the very, very known people in this area. You're going to get some outstanding speakers. The first inaugural thing will be roots of resilience, nurturing mental health in early development. How mental develops in the early and how you think. We've got outstanding panel, including we'll be doing some how to release yourself, how to relax yourself. Please do come. It's happening on 26th. Then 5th of July, not to be missed, our flagship annual event of MMA Annual General Body Meeting and the award function. MMA Award for the Managing Director presented. We have again the chief guest, Narendran, Chairman Tata Steel is going to be the chief guest. And we also have with us that day, Josh is going to be delivering the keynote address. We have outstanding speakers. It will be a great evening to showcase our thing. We'll be sharing with you the notice and also our annual report. We have done fairly a good year, which has gone by great performance with number of events, and we'll be showcasing. We really want to celebrate the grand successful completion of another financial year. Please do come, and you are joining. Our members do come, and it will be great to have you with us. Then on 18th of July, we have again securing future digital payments. Then 25th July, we have again different mental well-being second, and we have lined up number of events till end of July. Now coming today's event, we are always blessed and we are always privileged. We are chosen every time when he writes a book. And before he writes a book itself, his dates are booked with us actually. We are happy because somebody is thinking about you, and none other than Mr. Gopalakrishnan can do that. This is the 19th book, what is the thing we are going to be discussing today. And a great privilege for MMA to be associated with all the books we have discussed in launch. And I know the wealth of knowledge available at MMA and as an article, as a video. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hand together to welcome the distinguished panel this evening. The chief guest for this evening is Sheshai, Chairman Asia Paints, Gopalakrishnan, one of the author and corporate leader. We have got Rishi Bhattacharya. He is unable to come. He joined us from Mumbai in spite of his busy commitment. He's author, management consultant, teacher, former senior vice president of Unilever. And we also have distinguished other dignitaries here. And may I request Mr. Sheshai and Mr. Gopalakrishnan take a place on the dais. Before I call upon, thanks, Father. I think it can be a little, the round of applause should be very louder. Well, that's very nice. Because very rarely we get such outstanding and top leaders, corporate leaders come and speak to you. Before I request Mr. President to deliver the formal welcome address, the format of the program this evening is after the book is officially launched. I request the chief guest to share his insights. I walk over miles to listen to Mr. Sheshai, then Mr. Gopalakrishnan, then Rishi, the co-author. Thereafter, there will be a conversation, free-flowing conversation between the authors and the chief guest. Then we have a lot of questions will be coming online. As usual, people watching online, if you have any questions, the number on your screen. Please send all your questions that will be relevant to the theme. The distinguished speakers will be more than happy. Mr. Mahalingam is a distinguished alumnus of NIT Trichy. I am Calcutta. With over 35 years of experience, is a transformation leader, does phenomenal amount of work. He's been my president since last 1 year. We could achieve tremendous improvements and a lot of initiatives and things. If I take, I think we'll be eating into a lot of time for this evening program to all come to listen. Now I request Mr. Mali to please come and deliver formal comments. Mr. Mali.
Thanks, Vijay Kumar. You made me a distinguished alumni of IIM Calcutta today. Thanks for that. Just a distinguished alumni. Good evening, everybody. Such a wonderful feeling to see on a Thursday evening or a Friday evening so many people in this hall. And obviously the reason for that is the people on the stage today. It's indeed my privilege to deliver the welcome address during the discussion of the theme of the book, Embrace the Future, the Soft Sciences of Business Transformation. I think the future keeps changing so rapidly today that we need to embrace futures very often these days because it changes sort of dramatically. I consider it a real privilege to welcome this evening Mr. Sheshai, Chairman Asian Paints, who has kindly agreed to be the chief guest for this evening. Thank you, Mr. Sheshai. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, author and corporate advisor, and many more things. I think we'll keep it short because that list will not end quickly. Mr. Rishi Bhattacharya, author, management consultant and teacher, former senior VP Hindustan Unilever. So for me, being part of MMA is a series of fanboy moments, basically. People who, when I was in Calcutta and IIM, used to read about in the newspapers, Business India and stuff like that. It's a privilege to share stage with them today. Really, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, Mr. Sheshai, Mr. Rishi Bhattacharya, all of them really, they were icons in our time and you are icons now for us also. So it's really a privilege for me to do this, and I'm saying this from my heart because it's always wonderful to be able to listen to people whom we admired and learn so much from and are inspired by. So the degree of, one of the reasons I think all of you are so successful or whatever is the degree of planning that goes. I remember almost 3-4 months back, Mr. Rishi Bhattacharya reached out to me and said, the event is on a particular day. Are you sure our IIM friends will be there? Who else will be there? The kind of planning because he wanted the right audience for the book to reach to. So really, Rishi, I think really admire you for that. Thank you.
Thanks.
I also welcome the participants who have joined us this meeting with a guest of honor and members of MMA, members of TAI, and Calcutta Chennai chapter, and large number of participants from all over the country who have joined us online. Normally for these kind of events, get to begin with anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000 people watching this online, and it grows as it stays on YouTube or whichever the social media. For now, some numbers on MMA: 1956, 8,000, 10, and 14. 1956 is the year MMA was started. 10 is the number of chapters we have. 8,000 is the number of members we have. And 14 is the number of years consecutively that MMA has won the All India Management Award, Local Management Station Award. And most of those numbers are thanks to one man, Group Captain Vijay Kumar. I was jokingly saying in a committee meeting yesterday, it's lovely to be part of this association because we do these nice speeches and Vijay Kumar does all the hard work. Thanks, Vijay. You and your team rock. Yeah. Business transformation is the process by which an organization makes extensive changes to respond to numerous internal and external forces and enable it to adopt, evolve, and prosper, constantly adding value to customers in a team. Achieve business objective is a deliberate and purposeful undertaking. We're delighted to have Mr. Gopalakrishnan and Mr. Rishi Bhattacharya, who have between them 100+ years of experience in leadership roles. That's a mind-blowing number. And storytelling is a great way to get the message across. Narrating a few stories and experience from the corporate world, this book delves deep into the future and transforms according to market demands. Authors strongly feel that one main reason why such transformation succeed or fail has to do with combining the art and science of the change, the heart and the mind, and getting the balance of the two right. I think sometimes logic and science are given excessive importance and the art and the heart are forgotten. So I think this book tells you how to achieve the right balance between the two. Important too, these see transformation as a continuous endeavor and made part of an organization's work culture rather than to consider them as a once-in-a-while exercise. Authors conclude that the company that failed to adapt are destined to perish. You must imagine the future. This is a very powerful line. You must imagine the future we desire and then fold it into the present. It's really, I think, philosophically profound. I think I'm repeating myself, but I had to. It's a strong message from the book. With three top successful business leaders on the stage, I'm sure the participants today who have joined us at MMA and those who are watching it online will leave much wiser and much readier to embrace change, not only for their organization, but for themselves. Thank you. Have a greatly inspiring evening. Finally, I want to thank CAS for their continued support to MMA. I also take this opportunity to welcome past presidents, committee members of MMA, distinguished invitees, management students, etc., and people from all over the world watching this event online, on social media, etc. Wish you all a very enriching evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mali. Before we proceed further and formally launch the book, and let me have the privilege of introducing the distinguished panel chief guest for this evening. Seshai, I think he doesn't need an introduction. Seshai, everybody knows him so well. But Seshai is the chairman of Asian Paints Limited since 2023, bringing in decades of leadership experience, starting his career with Hindustan Lever in 1971. I think we could say that Hindustan Lever is the one which produces CEOs for all the things. I think it's made true by reading it regularly. He joined Ashok Leyland in 1976, rose to be managing director, executive vice chairman, driving significant growth. He has also chaired IndusInd Bank and Infosys Limited, enhancing their market presence beyond the corporate roles. He is also actively involved in industry association, public services, contributing to educational institutions and charitable institutions. And Mr. Shai has been great supporter of MMA. I think, especially for your contribution to Business Leadership Award, we can never forget one of the things that is driven as well. Very warm welcome to you, sir. Then we also have Mr. Gopalakrishnan, author and corporate advisor. He is an accomplished author and corporate advisor of over 50 years of experience at Unilever and Tata. He has held prominent roles such as chairman of Unilever Arabia, vice chairman of Hindustan Lever, and director of Tata Sons. Gopalakrishnan has authored 19 books and is currently the non-executive chairman of Castrol and an independent director with Press Trust of India. He holds a degree in physics, engineering, completed advanced course management program in Harvard Business School. Again, he's been a great supporter of MMA. Whenever we get into trouble, I just look up to him with reverence, and when I tell him, he's always never said no. Pleasure to have you with us again, sir. 19th book. I think we'll have a Silver Jubilee grand celebration. We will launch the Silver Jubilee book. Then we also have Rishi Bhattacharya. He unfortunately couldn't join us in person due to personal commitment. He joined us online. Thank you, sir. In spite of your busy commitment, also not being so well, he joined us online. He's a seasoned management consultant, teacher, author of about 50 years of experience, that what Mali mentioned. Between them, we have over 100 years of experience, including a role as a senior vice president of Unilever headquarters in Europe. He specializes in business strategy, innovation, and ethical alignment, offering deep insights into navigating global disruptions. Mr. Rishi is also a visiting faculty member at the Ross School of Business in Michigan. He has also co-authored several scholarly books along with C.K. Pradal. Very, very warm welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us this evening. Now, we'll go for a formal launch of the book. May I request Mali to please come on the stage. May I request step forward, do a launch. And Mr. Rishi, can you please join and show the book on the screen? It will be a formal launch of the book at Chennai. You have a copy of the book, you can show it on the screen. We have a copy of the book, you can show it on the screen. Come. Rishi, if you have a copy of the book, can you show it on the screen? Can you display it on the screen?
I'll have to get one. Let me get one.
Yes, yes, that'd be a nice. It's a moment which you don't want to miss it.
Sorry. Oh, don't.
Yeah, Mr. Rishi joining us online. Yeah, got it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rishi. Now, it's my privilege to request Mr. Sheshai, Chief Guest for this evening, for his address. Mr. Sheshai.
Good evening. Let me first thank Madras Management Association and Vijay for giving me this opportunity to introduce this very interesting book, which has been authored by two outstanding business leaders, two very well-respected authors, and two dear friends. You can't get a more blue-blooded person than Gopal and Rishikesh. Gopal led two leadership factories, Hindustan Lever and the Tatas, with a degree from IIT under his belt. Rishi held several senior positions as Vijay was reading out, and went on to teach at London School of Business and in the University of Michigan, and co-authored with Prahlad. So if these two people come together and say something, then we better sit up and listen, right? I mentioned that Hindustan Lever and the Tatas were two leadership factories. Indeed, they were. I think the two groups produced many leaders. Some of them are sitting here, like Bala, who went on to helm many enterprises throughout the country. Like SBI, which produced the leadership for the financial services, later on with ICICI producing leaders who transformed the financial services industry of the country. Leaders from Hindustan Unilever and the Tata Group went on to helm companies and transform the landscape of Indian industry to become globally competitive. I think I can say without any fear of contradiction that in my generation of leaders, which is about two generations behind, almost everyone had a little bit of gene from the lineage of Levers or from the Tata Group when they were the leading companies. So you can't get better credentials of authors than the two that we have here who have brought out this very interesting book. I could also, in a very, very modest way, say that I'm also a product of Hindustan Lever, not in the same league as Rishi and Gopal. But when I joined Levers, Gopal and Rishi had already arrived. When I say arrived, not in literal terms, but in metaphorical or figurative terms. Arriving in Levers as a covenanted manager has a physical connotation. It comes with unambiguous physical evidence that you arrived. The main part of that is a towel that is hung with your nameplate there in the towel stand in the men's toilet. That means that you've truly arrived. And of course, we also had the privilege of sitting out, sharing a cabin as a grade 3, I think it was called a grade 3 manager in those days, sharing a cabin with a printed painting on the wall. And I think by then, Gopal and Rishi had moved on to the next grade, grade 2, which had I think, original painting, not just the print, and had the luxury of a full cabin, and of course the privilege of having the towel in the men's room. The plebeians, the grade 4 managers, sat outside in the hall and had to do with their own handkerchief. But that is not what I'm referring to. The physical manifestation of those privileges, these two people had gone much beyond that. They had been identified at that time when I joined as someone who are very bright young managers whose destiny would take them to the very top in the company or somewhere outside. And indeed, both Gopal and Rishi have been part of several business transformation stories of India, or have had a ringside view. They've been a part of it, or they've had a ringside view. And including, in the case of Gopal, the transformation that was scripted and executed by my dear friend Jamshid Irani in Tisco. So these are very rich experiences. And so when they produce this book, and this book is a very elegant book, it's a very light book, it's just 230 pages. This is the distilled wisdom of two people who have seen it all. Now, not many managers are like scientists. There are some rare managers who, like scientists, look at every management experience and then develop these experiences into a conceptual framework. They understand the cause and effect of these various situations that they've been in, the various business experiences they have, and then develop a conceptual framework which facilitates them to anticipate, to identify, to understand and manage situations in the future. Managers don't do this often because they are burdened quite often with the task of having to meet the monthly target or the quarterly target, and therefore they're not scientists or much less philosophers. But a rare species of managers such as Gopal and Rishi move on to do that, to theorize on what they have learned, to put them in the context and create a conceptual framework. And that then guides them into the future, which is the reason why they have risen up to the task. So that brings me to my second point, which is why this book on business transformation now? I presume there are several books on business transformation. I must admit, I presume because I must confess that I've stopped reading books on management and leadership for the last 15 years, with some rare exceptions such as the ones done by my good friend Gopal. So I presume there are a lot. But when I read this book, after a gap of some years, when I read this book, I found it to be extremely relevant. Relevant to the current context. And relevant for three very important reasons. One is, as we just now heard, the kind of changes that we are witnessing now, the rapidity of the changes, the amplitude of the changes are so much that transformation is something that has to happen almost on a continual basis, a point that has been made out by the two authors. Transformation, business transformation is no longer a 10-year kind of a initiative, or whenever a leader changes, and then there's a massive amount of change that happens, a massive, large-scale, big bang transformation that takes place. Now, because of the kind of changes that are taking place around us and the rapidity with which they change, you almost continuously to do transformation. And that is why it is necessary for us now to start learning about why transformation is necessary and how transformation is to be executed. And the thoughts that I saw in these books are very relevant from the point of view of managing this kind of very, very high level of amplitude of change that we witness today. The second reason is that I believe now that the transformation is no longer a game that is to be played by the leader at the business enterprise level, but it is to be played by a number of people down the organization at their individual functional levels. We have seen that the evolution of almost every technology which has become successful and sustainable has happened because it has not come from a reductionist philosophy from top to the bottom, but because it is networked. Even if you look at artificial intelligence, that's been known for almost 60, 70 years. But so long as it was reductionist, so long as it was logically handed down, it didn't have a breakthrough. The breakthrough came 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when artificial intelligence moved into neural network kind of a pattern, mimicking the kind of way that the brain behaves and learns. An organization has also to become somewhat networked and neurally networked, and with creation of leadership at all levels, who then can push the changes happen in a more organic way so that the need for transformation on a big bang basis some every 5, 7 years or 10 years is obviated. I would even hazard to say that a big transformation, a big bang transformation, the scale of that is a direct reflection of the failure of a company to make itself contemporary. And that is the reason why you have to catch up 10 years later or 7 years later. But if it is to be done on a continuous basis, then it has to be done not from the top down, but from at the middle level, of the bottom up, and every neural node becoming a transforming agent. So I read this book. I, in fact, first read a couple of chapters, and then I went back and then said, let me read this book wearing the lens of a middle-level manager. Does it make sense? And I must say that it makes sense. Although I'm not sure that the authors wanted to present it that way, but it did make sense to me that every idea that has been expounded here makes sense even from the point of view of a middle-level manager. Because transformation, the concept of transformation, the challenge of transformation are the same whether you do it the top down from the very top or do it somewhere in between. That's the second reason why I think this is a relevant book. Then there's a third reason. And the third reason is that here are two companies, a clutch of very few companies which can claim that. Just these two companies, although they are more than 100 years old, have managed to remain contemporary and still hitting the top list. Many have disappeared. Many who were successful in the past have disappeared from the list of the top 10, 20, 30 companies. But if these two companies continue to remain young and contemporary and continue to be hitting the list, they must have a success formula. They must have a magic potion. And who else but these two authors who have been a part of that to tell us what that magic potion is. And that is the reason why I think the subject of transformation is very relevant in the context of the author's presentation. That brings me to the third point, which is, I think, a very interesting point about this. And that is the manner in which this has been approached. The first chapter of this book says it is head and mind. Transformation is not only about a set of processes that you have to put through in order to achieve the desired goal. It's not just a set of rules or a rule book which you have to adhere to in order to get the end result. There is as much of subjectivity and intuition in this as there is objectivity and rationale in the process of transformation. That's the substance of what the book says. And that's what the first chapter says, is head and mind. Interestingly, the book is a two-in-one. The first part of this has been written by Gopal, which is the subjective or predominantly subjective, the art of transformation. Although it doesn't shut out the science of it, the science of this is also there, but predominantly the art of transformation. And there's a second part which is from Rishi, which is predominantly the science of transformation. Also there's a bit of art in this. And it's very interesting the manner in which the style has been chosen. Gopal's style of giving this part of the first part of the book is something like a parable, right? It's a lot of stories, anecdotes. He describes his anecdotes and then says, what the moral of the story is. Somewhat like a parable. Somewhat like if you wish, a mini itihasa. I like that kind of reading because, it's like reading Rajaji's abbreviated book of Mahabharata. You can open any page. You can read the story of Bhishma and then jump the next day to read about the Pandava Vanavas, and then the third day you can go straight on to looking at the story of Harishchandra. It doesn't matter. You don't have to go in sequence. So there is embedded in each of this a thought which stimulates you, an idea which captures you, something to learn about. So Gopal's style of writing, which is very congruous to the idea of being an art, that is a style that he has adopted. In contrast, the second part of the book, which is the Rishi's part, which deals with the signs of transformation, is very logical, extremely structured, very, very tightly presented. You can't miss anything out of it. Not a word is out of context. And it is beautiful to look at the science presented in that manner and the art presented in a different manner. The two coming together makes it a fascinating read. If Gopal's style is a string of pearls, you can wear it any which way, then I think Rishi's work Rishi is writing is a carefully crafted necklace. You can only wear it in one way. If Gopal appeals to the art of transformation, Rishi talks about the science of transformation. If Gopal talks about the mind, talks about the heart of transformation, Rishi talks about the mind of transformation. If Gopal appeals to the right side of the brain, Rishi appeals to the left side of the brain. The two coming together makes it very fascinating reading. And I thought that was an extremely interesting part of this book. Lastly, let me come to what the substance of this book is about, which of course we'll have some chance to discuss later. The theory that has been put before us is that basically there are these true changes taking place. Rishi classifies them as three major forces of change. The change in terms of the customer needs, the type of needs, the change that takes place in technology, and the change that takes place in business structures. The three are different, but they are interconnected. And the interplay of these forces creates value. The interplay of these forces can also threaten existing businesses. It can also create huge opportunities to create value. And therefore, it is important, you have a strategy to identify the future. And Rishi lays out a 5-step process for transformation strategy. The first is to set a target, which comes out of a purpose. And the second is to prepare the mindset. And the third is to find a way of mapping all these three forces which are impacting the businesses. He also relies very heavily in terms of, or emphasizes the need for data. And that segues in some way to what Gopal says, although his portion comes earlier, which is to say that transformation is always very painful. All of us know that. We've all gone through that. I have personal experience of doing similar transformation in the years I was a chief executive. But I can say how much painful, not painful from the point of view of merely pushing through a major change, but also experiencing the result of the change. And therefore you need to, in order to manage that pain, you need people, leaders who are empathetic, who can under-promise and over-deliver, and who can cut out the jumla. And I'm not referring to any political, no political connotations, but someone who's grounded. So Gopal emphasizes the need for talent building and leadership in order to be able to cope with that. But there's something that he says at the end which really impresses me, and something which I find extremely comforting. And that is, he says, that there needs to be luck also. That reminds me of Napoleon. Napoleon said that I would rather have a lucky general than a great general. And I feel so comforted because I have always felt guilty about some of the transformational strategies that I have initiated and failed. Now I can go back and say that I was not the cause of it. It's the luck that failed me. Thank you very much.
Can I speak from here? Is it working? Because then Sesh can also hear what I'm saying. I have difficulty when we are sitting here to hear what the person is saying from there. Though, and I think privilege of age also I can exercise that. I'm sitting and speaking. Sorry? Okay, great. Good. Well, thank you very much for that. First of all, I must thank Wing Commander, Group Captain, keeps planes flying as a group, and he's doing that for the management fraternity. Thank you very much, you and your colleagues. 19th time, so he didn't tell me this, but I'm like that famously pregnant daughter-in-law of yesteryear who keeps arriving back at the mother's house every year. I must thank my good friend Sesh, who has a very distinguished career, as all of you know. And what he has done today is to summarize the book and made whatever I and Rishi are going to say redundant. Because he has given you a flavor.
I was just going to say that too.
Sorry?
I was just going to say that too.
Normally in these book launches, it's by people who've written history or literature. And then they read out passages. They'll tell you what happened at that time, or how the boy approached the girl, or whatever. But what approach we are taking is not to tell you what is in the book, but what is surrounding the book. And not exactly surprising, what Sesh has done is to bring out that picture very well. So in the 10-15 minutes I'll speak, and then Rishi, I'm also going to take the same approach, and I'm not going to tell you anything that is in the book, but what's around the book. My colleagues here from yesteryear, Balu and Maha, will all recognize that I like to tell them as parables, as stories. I think that's a quite reasonably good way. All of you are aware of the Bhagavatam, right? I'm not an expert on the Bhagavatam, but there is a particular story in the Bhagavatam which is relevant to this. And that story is that there was a very pretty girl, daughter of the ruling king, and she was imaginative. And in her dream, her name was Usha, in her dream, she saw the ideal potential husband. Strong arms, long eyelashes, etc., etc. But when she woke up from the dream, her friend said, "Why are you looking so scared?" She said, "I've seen my future husband. I want to embrace the future." But she said, "Who's he? Where do I go and look for him?" She said, "I don't know. But if you don't get him, I'll suffer and die." And the story goes on. And she really found out that it was the grandson of Lord Krishna. His name was Aniruddha, Pradyumna's son. And she brought him to Usha, and that's the first known recorded case of cohabitation without matrimony. Okay, this is the story in the Bhagavatam. And I'm mentioning the story in this context because when we see something and we have imagined it, we want to embrace it. And what Usha wanted was to embrace this very handsome, gifted, virtuous boy. But when I tell the story, I've done it to 3 groups of people. One group says, "Oh, that time they knew artificial intelligence, is it? Because we think that everything was invented in India long before, plastic surgery, artificial intelligence." So they said this is evidence that there was artificial intelligence. The second group says, "What a lovely story. The story is a story." And the third group says, "Well, how can I put some rigor into this in my life? Because I'm not dreaming about handsome boys and pretty girls." And I think if I'm not guilty of converting Madras Management Association into Madras Mythology Association, I thought I will start with a mythological story. Because imagination is the most important part of embracing the future. No, I shouldn't say most important part. It's a very important part of embracing the future. And Rishi will talk a bit to that. So I'm just resetting the context a little bit. How can you imagine what is uncertain, what you cannot embrace? And you could go wrong also. If you follow this book, you will not always get it right. And in the first part, as Sesh has covered, we have talked about related things about carrying people with you and so on. I was once walking around the museum in London, and for a change, most of us go to these museums, we got 2 hours and we walk around and then we come off, we pick up a brochure. But in a particular occasion, I took a guide. I decided to spend a little bit of money and let's see if I can get educated in sculpture, which is not my subject. And there was a beautiful sculpture. And my guide tells me, "Are you admiring it?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "What are you thinking?" I said, "I'm just thinking, how did he imagine the arms of this person, the thighs and the calves? And how did he hit that so that he could produce this?" So he said, "You seem to be convinced that he has produced this by imagining it and shaping it." I said, yeah, is there any doubt about it? He says, that's not the way sculpture happens. Great sculptors imagine the block. They figure out what to remove from it. And the residual is what makes the statue or the sculpture. I don't know if that is true. I've never verified it. But imagining the future is about removing what is not required and getting on with what you have to do. Celebrating the past is about keeping what you have and enjoying it. And this is where the challenge comes. When Sesh and Rishi and I began our careers in the late 60s, early 70s, once in a while when a very American style, first 100 days, what did he do and say? We get put under these pressures. And reorganization would happen once in 10 years. But by the time we finished our careers, in fact, as leaders in our own respective areas, we found the damn thing is happening all the time. And metaphorically, it is like raising a child. When our daughters were born, we were very, very busy doing all the things that parents do for their children at that age. But one fine day, when they were 20 or 25 and they were doing their Arangetram in Bharatanatyam or got a scholarship to Princeton, you suddenly think with great pride, understandable, that what a lovely thing has happened. So there are two parts to raising a child, as all of us know. And none of us is trained in raising a child, by the way. I've never met anybody who says, I've done my PhD in parenting. So when you're raising a child, you have to deal with the immediate. You have to live in the present. You have to remember that the child tends to get cold or cough or whatever from the past. But a mother keeps dreaming. A mother is able to handle short-term and long-term simultaneously. It is almost as though she's got two circuits in her brain and both are 24/7 on. So in spite of changing the nappy, getting the milk and this and that, she's also able to dream that child of hers will become a professor or an engineer or whatever. Men are not so good at it. I must confess, as the husband of one wife, as the father of two daughters, and the grandfather of three granddaughters, I must say women's brains work somewhat differently. They are able to deal with short and long term simultaneously. Now, why have I said all this? Because when you're wanting to deal with the past and you want to maintain that tradition, the left brain is very helpful. You have memory, you think about it, and we've always done it this way. When you're living in the present and you have to solve a problem, your brain works in what I call the fluid part of your intellect works. Solving problems in new ways and getting on with it. But as you get older and when you come to leadership positions, you tend to have a better chance of being in a leadership position. You have to rely on what is called crystallized intelligence. If you can imagine a pot of water into which you're putting sugar and you keep on adding 1 spoon at a time and keep stirring it, at some stage it will get saturated. And at some stage it will get super saturated. This is our old chemistry lesson from school. And when it gets super saturated, it starts to crystallize. And this is what happens to us. We are all like an empty pot of water, done our engineering, MBA, accountancy, whatever. And then sugar is put in. Sugar, read, experience. Lessons we've learned from things we have done. They're very unique to you. And it keeps getting stirred. And suddenly you're 40, you're quite different in the taste of who you are. And then more and more gets added. You're now 50, 55, and things start to crystallize. And in your brain, these little crystals are sitting, which are products of your own experience. And the great advantage about imagining and embracing the future is that you need a mixture of the raw mind, of the sweet mind, and the supersaturated mind with crystals. It is a place for elderly people, so-called elderly people. I mean, nowadays I don't consider 50 as elderly, but my children laugh at me saying, you're really gone over the hill. So I think this is a very fascinating subject, relevant, and touching all our lives, not just in business and enterprise, but even in your day-to-day life. And therefore, we have chosen this heart and mind approach that Sesh referred to. And we actually had an argument, Rishi and I, friendly argument, not like the ones that are in politics. And then we came to the conclusion, maybe you need both. Have you ever seen a company succeed because it had a fantastic strategy but did it heartlessly? Probably not. Have you ever seen a nice, gushy, gooey company that was very nice to people but didn't know what to do? So what to do and how to execute are both the left glove and the right glove. I have written the how to do part, which is very often forgotten. You can introduce 3 farm laws which are very well constructed, right? They may be very logical, but then it may receive a certain resistance when you go to implement it. And I love quoting the example of, now that I'm sitting in Chennai, the introduction of Hindi. You know, back in 1951, we adopted Hindi as a national language. There was objection. They said, we'll do it after 15 years. You know, and then 14th year, Lal Bahadur Shastri was the Prime Minister. He said, okay, if it's been decided, press the button. We pressed the button, and you know, this city was in flames around here. These transformational exercises take time. You can't do transformational exercises in a hurry. You would like to do it in a hurry, but it's difficult. This is what I mean by saying heart. And understanding the pace of change, because every institution has a capacity for change. Tamil Nadu has changed more than Bihar. In women going to schools, colleges, coming into the workforce, literacy, health, all that we know. Why? Because you push and various events happen politically which are not the subject for our discussion today. And in Bihar, those embracing the future activities did not take place. Today, there's a very stark difference that you can see. But it's taken how many years? From the time Kamaraj introduced the midday meal scheme, it must be at least 50 years now, 60 years. So I will stop there, and Rishi will take 10 minutes, and then perhaps we can have a conversation between Sesh and all of you. Thank you very much for listening to me. Oh, Rishi, I thought you were asking me to give him the mic, you know. I said, artificial intelligence carried too.
I too want to thank the Madras Management Association for hosting this book discussion that we have written recently. And I thank Gopal every day for various things we do together and things that he does for me. So I'll skip him now and go to Sheshashai, my dear friend. We were working on the same floor of Hindustan Lever House for 4 or 5 years. And sometimes we used to fight because the brand managers and the commercial accountants were always challenging each other. And it is that spirit of challenge that got imbibed probably in all 3 of us and in numerous other managers. So today is a very nice day for me, though I have to look at all of you virtually, and I apologize for that, but I was just not well enough to be able to travel. I want to say that, as Gopal said, Shesh has so kindly and so thoroughly read the book that whatever we could tell you about the book, there is nothing more in terms of principles, themes that we wanted to put together. So his 5-point explanation of what is in the book, if we can record it and put it together, then that has been said. So I normally don't do this. I take a opposite or a complementary role with Gopal and explain a little bit more of the book, but it will be repetitive if I were to do it now. So I want you in the audience to imagine yourself. We have been talking about imagination and the importance of imagination. So let's imagine, we don't have to imagine that we are in the present. We are in 2024, we are here. But let us go backwards and think of ourselves in 2015 and then go back and think of ourselves in the year 2000. So when people were in the year 2000, they were looking at 2015 and 2024 as things well ahead in the future, 15 years away, 25 years away, and so on. And when you look at the track record of a lot of companies who were sitting there in the year 2000, who produced online marketplace. Online marketplace did not exist. Today is a $6 trillion market. There are people who created ride sharing, that you could not take a taxi, but the taxi would come to your door and drop you back at somewhere else. That is today a $1.5 billion market. Look at mobile payments, where India is actually a leader in many, many areas to make ourselves a cashless society here. PayPal started it, I think, in about 2010. So it was, and worldwide today, that particular thing is $60 billion. If you look at digital entertainment, that all of us now take streaming as a sort of, something that is every day, that didn't exist. So all of these has been created by people who were sitting around the year 2000 and produce all these miraculous looking businesses, which are all, today we think of them as sort of everyday products. Unfortunately, there is also a flip side to this. That if you look at the threat that change produces or time produces, so if you go from 2000 to 2024, you find that 52% of Fortune 500 companies have either been sold, or they have been merged, or they have been ceased to exist. So just like I mentioned, some new companies that didn't exist, companies that existed for a long, long time don't exist today. And think of Kodak, think of Nokia, think of Motorola, think of Blockbuster, Radio Shack, and many of those really successful companies in the previous century who in a short span of 10 to 15 years have ceased to exist. So coping with change, dealing with change is something that is both an opportunity and can actually be an existential threat. And for all managers, therefore, it is grasping the opportunity and not take on the threat that takes place. That is why our mindset in writing the book and in trying to communicate our ideas, we chose the word embrace, because embrace is a mindset of going for something that is attractive, that you have been able to see or partly see, and then actually implement that. Future, normally, most of us as people, we tend to be, what's the right word? We tend to be sort of somewhat fearful of the future. We think it's an unknown. We don't want to grapple with it. And a lot of us managers have created a beautiful system by which we fill up our time, all our time, with good things and also some junk, so that we say, oh, but we don't have time to think about the future. But we have come to a stage, we have come to a moment where if you do that, you will go into the Kodak category and not be in the Apple or the Amazon category. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to briefly touch on, because that's a real life issue and real life problem for a lot of us in business, is that when we talk about transformation, what do we understand from the word transformation? Some people think about it as it is really transformation if you have managed to make a difference to the life of your customer. Unfortunately, this is a minority view. The majority view thinks transformation is about inward looking, restructuring, dealing with the organization, as if solving the people problems in the organization will give you a big success in the market. And that rarely happens. So you can cut your costs, you can streamline some operations. Those are important. Those are not to be scoffed at. But in our opinion, Gopal and my opinion, those are not real transformation. You have to work on transformation that actually touches the lives of people, not only touches it, but makes a difference to the life of the people. And the biggest single example that I can think of, and all of us, if you touch your pockets, you will find that the biggest single transformation that has taken place in the last 20 years is the cell phone or the smartphone. Because in that one little gadget that has been created, there are 8.64 billion in the last count of these phones. And the most interesting thing for me is 2 billion of them are actually in China and India. US has only 375 million cell phones. Europe has only 400 million cell phones. So the change in the life of people that has been done by that act did not exist 20 years ago. And being able to see that, so the question is, are we actually able to see the future? Are we a palmist? Are we a futurist? What? And no, we are just businessmen who are using our practical experience and our knowledge to find a way, which Sheshashai explained very beautifully by saying that if you look at all the change around us, there is probably a way to process that change so that the right things come into your boxes and the irrelevant things are not put into the boxes. Secondly, the change, if it's classified properly, will sit in the right boxes. And then you can see from the societal change, the technology innovation, and the business system innovation that Shesh explained, how to bring them in balance. And maybe during the question and answer session, if some of you want to know how to bring them in balance, Gopal and I can give you a couple of examples of, how to do that. So maybe I'll stop here. I hope that's been useful for the audience.
How should we do this? It's easy to ask questions, so I'll take up the task of asking questions and let them answer. Yeah, actually, there are quite a few very interesting questions on the table. In fact, far too many to be answered in the next 30 minutes. So let me just kick off with a couple of questions, and then we can move on to answering these questions coming from the floor, and I presume from the online viewership as well. One question that sort of troubled my mind, Gopal, you call this the embrace the future. That fits in very well with Usha wanting the embrace Anirudh. But Anirudh was very definite, very, very clearly defined, including the length of his eyelashes, and the very visual, and it's possible to embrace. Whereas the theory of leadership and management in the last couple of, or last decade, or maybe a couple of decades, has been to say that you design the future. The future is not visible, not definite. You have to design the future. We have to be successful in the future, then you create your future. And that's been the theme song of people like CK, Prahlad. Now, how does this concept of embracing the future stack up with creating and designing the future?
Rishi, I'll take the first call and then you can add if you wish. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, to embrace the future, you must first imagine the future. And what Usha did was to imagine Aniruddha. And then she sent her friend to go and find out where this handsome man lives. And she embraced the future. So I'm not sure there is a big difference. And what happens to leaders, and Rishi can talk to this because he lives in America and he's living in the middle of a lot of change happening. When Scully could not turn Apple around because somebody in the board of Apple thought that they need processes and systems and they brought in a big company man, John Scully, and then things didn't work out. They were still in the imagination phase. So in our lives also, when you're young as a child, you're in the imagination phase. Then you come to the embracing stage when you're a little older and can stand on your feet. There's a sequence to this which automatically comes. I don't see them in conflict, Sesh. Rishi, you want to add? You can please chip in.
I'll just add one sentence. I think the concept of embrace the future, Shesh, is derived from the mindset with which leaders and senior managers and middle managers, as you said, must approach the future. Because if they do it out of dread or out of uncertainty or out of claiming that they have no time and so on and so forth, if you do not have the positive mindset of saying, I'm going to be great because I'll go ahead and embrace the future, then you take off those roadblocks. Then you can go to the next stage, which we, Gopal and I, have called corporate purpose in the second section of the book, where corporate purpose is the future that you are setting up for yourself 20 years away. And yesterday or day before, Gopal and I were talking to a company in Delhi, and they said some time ago, actually, that they are in the business of preserving and enriching the legacy of basmati rice in this country. Then the future that they wanted to achieve was so clear for them that the next steps that you say, imagine that future that you want and work backwards. We tend to work from the present forwards, but if you can imagine that future, and we keep calling imagine as if it is not real. In our case, in a business case, that imagination is real. That comes through that modeling that we discussed about. And through that modeling, you are able to work backwards from that goal, the corporate purpose, and the targeted future that you set for yourself.
Joe, let me follow up this statement with another question to you, Rishi.
Yeah.
When you say you imagine the future and work backwards, that future, as you have said so eloquently in your book, is the outcome of the interplay of these three mega trends or three major forces, right?
Yeah.
Now, the whole game is about what would be the outcome when these three forces play out, and in what manner is that going to impact your business. The predictability of that is really the issue. I want to take example of the EduTech, the education technology business. We saw a huge kind of entrepreneurial initiatives taking place during the COVID, just past the COVID, where we believed that there would be a fundamental change in terms of how we deliver learning. And you had lots of entrepreneurial ventures coming in the space of education technology. Not only the entrepreneurs, you had large number of investors investing very heavily in that. But the interplay of these forces resulted in some other outcome, right? It was short-lived.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's about, precisely what is the outcome of these forces, which are much beyond our control. So is this a game of dice, you think, or is there a way by which you can make intelligent guesses about what the outcomes are? Or how you de-risk your business in the event that it doesn't happen the way that you predict?
Yeah, let me briefly try to address this. So the way the model works, and I keep saying model as if it is really absolutely, scientifically modeled. It is a working model, something that has worked in my teaching and consulting practice, and Gopal and I have sort of started believing in it. I'll give you an example to show that these three circles that we are talking about must come into equilibrium. That you cannot take one of these boxes. In your example that you gave, you talked about the technology and the investors going their own path by saying this is actually a technology game. What happens in our modeling, and I'll try and describe it through an example again. Look at our country and diabetes in this country. And there are 10 crore people who are diagnosed with diabetes. And there are medicines and so on which can manage that. But if you look at the societal trend of people going to get diabetes, the number of people who have pre-diabetes, who are heading to a 6 HbA1c score, is 14 crores. And if you could cater to them, then they would literally never get diabetes, or it will be substantially delayed. So they won't get early diabetes at 40s and so on and so forth. You take that societal trend and try to find a technology solution that could serve that. And one of them is already available, which is the HbA1c testing. So that technology of establishing that you have pre-diabetes is well established. The second technology does not take us 50 years ahead in terms of new science, but goes 2,000 years back into old science. And it is Ayurveda and some traditional Chinese medicine. That technology is available, but people are not really connecting these two. The third part of it is the business system change, because when you are going to diagnose this problem, when you are going to establish that there is a health problem, the allopathic doctor will not touch you because it's a threat to his business. So you have to go back to the Ayurveds. And today, you are able to contact or put in touch a consumer or a patient to an Ayurved through the same digital processes that we do, and the same digital process by which I am still available in Chennai to talk to you guys that I could not do a few years ago. So when someone imagines these three things together and puts them into equilibrium and puts them into balance, then a new business model starts emerging. And the latter part of that section 2 of the book then says you use that knowledge and start challenging industry assumptions, existing industry assumptions. And if you are able to challenge those and say, consumer wants something else, industry is offering something else, there is a little bit of a seed from which a new business model can be created that has a 60, 70, 80% chance of success. So, I don't know, Shesh, you are looking not very convinced still. I hope you won't ask a follow-up question to this one.
No, I was just getting intimidated by the stack of books that you got behind you. I'm going to switch on to the questions from the floor and the online questions that have come. Some of them are really, really bright questions. Lots of them, so make some selections of them. I'm going to start with a question from Nitisha from Chengalpet. How can organizations balance the integration of advanced technology like generative AI with maintaining and nurturing human elements such as creativity and compassion? How relevant is change management in this context? Gopal, you want to take that?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. And just to repeat the question, how can you integrate, or how can two opposing things coexist? Integration of new available opportunities in technology with the human element. I come from the school, and I think anybody with the same amount of gray hair on his head will agree with me, that if you don't have the human element, you can integrate all the technology, nothing will happen. Whereas if you're not succeeded in integrating the technology and you have the good human element, you may last a little longer. There is no immortality in business. This is why we call it the art of change management, how to carry people with you. When I began my career, I started as a computer engineer. This is not this type of computer that we use nowadays. This was the mainframe computer where you went in there, booked time, and you started punching buttons and tapes and discs moved, And at that time, my bosses in Hindustan Lever said, "What are you young fellows come with funny degrees from IIT? You mean you'll do all this by computer? You can sell Lifebuoy soap and Dalda through the computer." So it took a lot of explaining that it's not selling Dalda and Lifebuoy. But today the same question is being asked with AI. People, that these are transformative technologies. In hindsight, computers have transformed lives. If my grandfather came, he said, "What are you guys doing? How do you spend your day sitting at the same place?" So I think the ability to carry the people with you is at least as important, if I may exaggerate a little bit, perhaps a little more important. And that's one reason why personally, in my transformation experiences during my career, the first person I've recruited and relied upon is the HR officer. The HR people are shocked because they think I should have got the marketing director first or the finance. I went to Arabia. I was in blind territory. I was in the desert. The first guy I recruited was the HR guy. And I came back to Bangalore. My esteemed colleague R.R. Nair was a solid pillar, and I relied on him. And in many ways, the HR person in Hindustan Lever, if I look back at the last 50 years, has been a guy who can talk truth to power. Ranjan Banerjee could even tell a tough guy like TT. Maybe not in the meeting, but he'll shuffle along to his room later on and say, TT, and he'll get the point across. And I think this is a call in embracing the future. It's not the HR fellow's role, but he has a very, very powerful role in the future. And I think that will answer your question.
There is a somewhat related question. And actually, this question has popped up in my mind in a very different context, and I'll explain that. If you believe that there is a certain art, a certain soft path, transformation, change management, leadership, all of that, this question becomes relevant. How can organizations measure, the key word is measure the impact of cultivating soft skills like curiosity, creativity, and compassion on their overall performance and success? And I'll tell you why this resonates with me, because in some years ago, we started a university, which I'm sure you've heard about. And one of the things that I tried to do in that is to say that we need really to build leaders in that university, not impart knowledge, because knowledge is very easily accessible through a button in the computer. Therefore, we need to build leaders, and if we have to build leaders, we really need to get them to become more curious, better at creative thinking, critical thinking, and creative abilities. And then I sat back and then said, but at the end of the day, how are we going to measure what is the impact of what you're doing? How has this person, the student who has entered this portals of this university, how has improved the curiosity? How has she improved her critical thinking capabilities? How has she become more creative? So that's a question which relates to somehow measuring, and we are all used as managers to say, what you don't measure, you don't manage, right? How do you measure these outcomes? Rishi, you want to take a
Yeah. The essential thesis of our book, and I think that can help to address this question, is that you don't manage strategy in isolation or people in isolation. So it is not that so many changes are taking place and how do people adapt to that in a sort of vacuum. So no matter how curious your people are, no matter how compassionate the people are and they have the motivation and the drive, if there isn't a goal, then that does not really take you very much forward. Similarly, if you have a goal and you don't have these qualities with your people, or you are not able to instill into them these qualities, then also the success that you are looking for, the end of the day, business has to be successful, business has to make money, business has to contribute to society and pay taxes and so on and so forth. So the transformation game is trying to do that with a single objective. The mind side, which creates strategy, is also created by people. So you need people like that who will create the thinking model by which the strategy comes, always responding to what is the opportunity out there in the market. And every single factory worker, every single accountant, every single HR guy, if he is not working with that same objective of what are we trying to achieve in the market and what our goals are, and then pattern their human qualities to that goal, you will work in two silos and you might be good at both, but you will be a failure company. And that is one of the essential theses that Gopal and I have tried to express in the book.
I fully agree. Another very interesting question, and this is from Varun, and I will try and amplify this question with my own inputs. The question is, in your opinion, how much will the future resemble the past in terms of business trends and practices? What are some key indicators that the organization should monitor to anticipate future changes? The amplification that I want to make is that is history truly a good teacher? Because the context in which something happened in the past is very different to the context in which it will happen in the future. What worked in the past does not necessarily have to work in the future. And history, by definition, is something that you look at as dots and not as whole picture. The pixels don't connect. You can connect it any which way that you want. And depending on your ideological predisposition, your own perspectives, you present history in a particular fashion. Somebody else will present history in a different fashion. So history is very fluid. And in that context, to what extent should we really be looking back at the history to even understand the future? That's the question, which I think is the substance of this question. That's a very interesting question. You want to take it up?
Yeah, it is an interesting question. I hope my answer is at least somewhat illuminating, even if it is not interesting. I like to talk in metaphors, so I'll use a metaphor. The fundamental principles of business have not changed for 5,000 years. The way the merchants in Pumpuhar were trading, or in the Kachi Bhatiyas who went to Africa, and some of the principles that we use in today's modern world are the same. Be good to your customer. Just like in religion, you follow the same 10 commandments, but there are multiple versions of Christianity. In Hinduism, Swami Vivekananda said, do only 4 things. I won't go into all the 4 right now. And that is applicable to business. So, your reference to history must be with regard to what are the durable long-term principles that have been evolved in this business. Otherwise, history can be a little bit of a potential guide, maybe a potential solution. I'm not in favor of managers being lost in history. You may take interest in history. And so it is the here and now. And this is what our saints and acharyas have also said, that this philosophy has not changed, but the manner of interpretation and execution of that philosophy has changed. We are all part of the same. I don't want to get too much into philosophy, but you recognize what I'm saying. We are all part of the same origin. We've come through different paths, and all these paths lead to the same place. Find your own path. When Gautam Buddha got enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he said, none of you should be here if you're not willing to debate with me. And if you're not convinced, that's fine. And that's why Indians are so argumentative, which is a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
One last question which I'm going to pose to both of you, which has been raised by Mr. Sundaraman Chintamani. Today, most organizations have become lean and leaders are under pressure to deliver. Hence, they tend to focus on KPIs 24/7. How to ensure that the leaders get thinking time and also indulge in business storytelling? That's an interesting question, because the substance of the question is that how do you get leaders to trade off between the short term and the long term? How do you ensure that the people give at the right levels more emphasis in the long term, sometimes even at the sacrifice of the short term? I've often narrated a story which I will repeat here. This is a story about a poetess, the Tamil poetess Avayar. Avayar had this friend called Adiyaman, who was one of these chieftains, a small kingdom. And as always happens, he had a rival. And Avayar was spending all the time trying to composing poems in praise of Adiyaman. And this rival king said that, why does Avayar keep only eulogizing Adiyaman? Why not she compose poems in my praise? So he invited Avayar and laid out the red carpet for her. And he took her to his armory. And then he said, here is my armory. Look at all the shining weapons that I have. And Avayar took a very deep look at that and walked around and said, wonderful, it's very nicely bent. Everything is perfectly stored, polished, and so on. But you know what? Adiyaman wins wars. When Adiyaman wins battles, his is completely in a shambles, but he wins battles. So in a way, what that story conveyed to me was that sometimes, and I've seen this happen, I mean, the very illustrious example of Moses, I think, which went into the Six Sigma process, and the entire organization was evangelizing the Six Sigma, and everybody was into it. But then they missed out some of the strategic moves. I recall another instance where I went to one of the companies in Chennai and took my entire leadership team, because this company was a pioneer. I'm not mentioning the name of the company because all of you recognize that. This company was a pioneer in TQM. And I wanted all my leadership to understand how this company was achieving this wonderful targets in TQM. And we spent the whole day, and we were very impressed. But you know what? In a few months' time, the company got into trouble because the entire management process was focused on getting the quality management right. Of course, they had excellent productivity, they had excellent shop floor hygiene and all of that. But some of the strategic moves that they had to move was not in the radar of the leadership. So that company got into trouble. So I think the substance of this question is, how do you get the balance between the short and the long term? So I'll leave that question as the last part. We just have 5 minutes and then we wind up.
I'll give my piece and then Rishi can add if he wishes to. I've got lots of examples, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to cover those. I say go home Look at your wife or your mother or your sister or your daughter-in-law, depending on your age group, and see how they are coping with having a baby at home. When my daughters and son were being born, we were younger, we were busy, and I was pretending to help, or my wife thought I was pretending to help, but I was not helping, dealing with the short term, changing nappies and this and that and feed and all that stuff. And now that I've seen my granddaughters arriving, I've had a more distant view of what's happening. And I have come to the conclusion, whether it is borne out by neuroscience or not, I don't know, that there are two circuits in the brain. Men can operate only one circuit. One is called short-term circuit, one is called long-term circuit. So if the baby is crying and she says, "Oh God, Sesh, come and help me," he will take out his computer and Google baby crying. And he will take half an hour to find an answer, which is not a bad way to do it. The woman will ring up Shalini, Padmini, Ragini, "How did you solve this problem?" She's got the answer. Men use maps, even when a husband and a wife are driving. The men will keep looking at their maps. The woman will get down the window and say, in the very younger, "How do I get to that place?" So I think there's a lot that managers can learn from the way women work, because you have to learn the art of activating both circuits. And your best teacher, for me, my best teacher has been my wife. You're welcome to communicate this to her to get me a few brownie points.
Do you want to add on to that?
I'll just add a minute and not more, which is that all of us leaders and managers in our day-to-day jobs, when we are working the present, we think of that often in isolation. But every present has a past, and every present will have a future. So what do you derive from the past? What do you get from the past? You get a lot of data from the past, and they are very important. And that quantitative data, regrettably, brings you only to the present. It doesn't take you beyond that, but it's good enough. After that, you can use extrapolative techniques and so on that get you into the future. History from the past brings you also to the present. The culture of the organization also brings you from the past to the present. If the people addressing the present, which is, today we talked a lot about the future, but Gopal and I believe that if you can't manage the present, if you're not successful in the present, good luck to your future. I mean, there is not going to be, very much there. But the role of history, the role of culture, and the role of data must be combined together and sold to the organization in a way that they all drive to the success of the business and to meet the objectives. And once you have crossed the present, but you are still in the present, but crossing it. Gopal has an example in his way he explains things of guys sitting in an aircraft and thinking they are in the present, but they are hurtling at 1,000 kilometers an hour into the future. So if you are not able to start also taking the weak signals, amplifying the weak signals from the present through the modeling that we have proposed, and I don't think anyone should take it as a sort of farman, an absolute model, but a working model, a thinking model. Then you also say, from the present, I can now see certain things, and if this is the future I seek to get, then there is a good chance that you have to be. So today's leadership requires a completeness and a connection from the future backwards to future to present to past, and from the past to the present to the future. If you are not able to operate in each of these three frames, you need help, you need guidance, you need more training. And hopefully, Gopal and I have managed to provide some thought, some way to, think around these issues.
Thank you, and my apologies to all those who raised questions and which could not be taken out was a constraint of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think fascinating is a management masterclass this evening. You're all privileged. Over 780 people are watching it online. Thank you so much. Actually, we missed your presence here, but since you are separated by distance, we got a digital memento for you. And may have a digital memento. What we do is we do a lot of CSR work in the schools. On your behalf, we present books to the needy, poor children. And this is a way so many leaders, thought leaders like you come and speak. That adds a lot of value to us. Thank you so much for joining in spite of not being well from Mumbai and sharing your insights. Very thought-provoking, insightful. May I request Mr. Balraman to please come on the stage and present memento on behalf. Can you please?
Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, can you also join us for a picture? Come. Picture? Wonderful. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The book is available and the author is kindly agreed to autograph the book and you will to buy and get it done. Thank you so much. Get back home safely till you meet again. Good night. Bye-bye, Mr. Rishi. Pleasure to have you with us. Good night and get well soon. We'd like to see you next time when you visit we would like to host your event. Thank you so much.
Me too. I look forward to an opportunity in the future. Thank you.